Good morning. We will call the Election Law Committee of the Senate to order, and we have the prime sponsor of our first bill. Senator, if you'd introduce yourself and the bill.
Thank you, Chairman, and hope your roads were smooth on the way in this morning. For the record, I am Senator Rebecca Perkins-Quokka from Senate District 21, City of Portsmouth and surrounding towns. And today I'm introducing SB 535, an act relative to absentee ballot forms. This bill amends RSA 657-4 to align it with RSA 657-1. The purpose of the bill is not to change policy or expand the requirements regarding absentee voting. It is simply correcting two misaligned conflicting statutes. SB 535 updates the section of the absentee ballot request form regarding receiving an absentee ballot in the case of a winter storm warning due to concerns about traveling to the polls. In doing so, it corrects conflicting language that regulates who qualifies. This change makes sure that the ballot forms for a request under RSA 657-1 in this scenario would comply. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions from the committee?
I'm still showing up, Chairman.
Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Tentrelli?
Thank you. My name is Liz Tentarelli. I'm president of the League of Women Voters of New Hampshire, and I support this minor change in the absentee ballot form. I support it because people are unfortunately confused about the circumstances under which they can vote absentee when there is a winter storm warning. And last year during town meeting, of course, March town meeting, we had exactly that situation. I used the League of Women Voters Facebook page to publicize it, and you'd be surprised at some of the odd feedback I got from that. But one of them was, that's only if you're a real old person. And I grant you that was in some of the language of the original bill, but that's not the point. And I tried to make clear that nobody should be denied the right to vote because they're unable to get to the polls. You don't have to be old for that to happen. It may be that you might normally walk there, but you can't because the roads are too slippery and dangerous. Maybe your car, like mine, doesn't much like snow or ice. I suppose I qualify as really old under this, but I'd rather not think of myself that way. I think of myself as somebody who is determined to vote, and if it's much better and safer for all concerned that I vote the day before, that I do it. So I think that changing the language here will ease that confusion on some people who are saying, no, you can't vote that way just because. So I thank you very much, Senator, for introducing this, and I thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Are there any questions from committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much. On the sheet, we have one other person who signed in support. Do you have the online count? You have to turn your mic on.
There were 54 in support and 2 opposed.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else that didn't sign up that wants to? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and we'll open the next public hearing in just a few minutes.
The Election Law and Municipal Affairs Committee is going to open the hearing on SB 530 and welcome the prime sponsor, Senator Jim Gray.
Thank you very much. I am James Gray, and I want to introduce Senate Bill 530 relative to reports of receipts and expenditures filed with political committees. This bill is a pet peeve of mine. That a lot of times when people file their reports, especially if they do it via facsimile, when they get them up online, they are unreadable. And so the main thrust of this is to make sure that, that people are able to put something up online that people can actually see and read. And with that, I will stop my testimony and go ahead.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? That's trying to get in their chair. All right, thank you.
We'll just behind my chair.
All right, next up on our list, we have Erin Hennessy, Deputy Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Chair,
Thank you.
members of the committee. Our office supports this bill. We have many, many complaints that come in from people who are trying to view many of the filings that they cannot read it. Sometimes the filings are printed out by the filer and then faxed to our office, and then those faxes we have to scan and then upload into the campaign finance system. And the more processing that you do, the more illegible that becomes. Filings through the campaign finance system by the registrant electronically are all legible because this information is loaded in electronically. I do want to make one comment that the legislation is unclear as to if the filing is considered timely if illegible or not. So our take on the reading of this bill would be that the filing is not considered filed until it is legible. If you would like to make that more clear in the legislation, that would be great for our office. But that's just the one comment I have on that.
Sure. Thank you. Any questions from the committee?
If you would put the suggested words that you'd like on an email and send it to Trish so she can send it out to the committee, I'd appreciate that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And then we have Liz Tentrelli signed up in support but not speaking. Is there anyone else here who is not signed up that would like to speak on SB 530? Seeing none, I close the public hearing on SB 530. And I return this gavel.
You want to do the next one?
Happy to help anytime.
One of the two. we could do the next.
Oh, do you have the next one too?
Until
Sure.
5.
Sure.
All right. There are 3 of us here now. So are there any bills that anybody wants to exec, then we would go into an executive session and try to so move? I'll tell you what, I'll move to go into executive session.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to go. We have a motion and a second to go into executive session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, we're in executive session. The bill we just heard from Senator Perkins Quokka, 535.
I would move ought to pass.
Okay, we have a motion of ought to pass. I'll second the motion. Do we have any comments, questions? I don't believe I heard any suggested changes.
If I could just put a,
Senator,
thank you, Mr. Chairman. On line 7 and 8, it says, I maybe brought this up to the point that it may sound annoying, but it says what the absences are. And
which
it-
page are you on?
I'm on page 1, lines 7 and 8, and it says disability. And I always looked at that as, it should always say physical disability, because that's what Part 1, Article 11 says.
Well, that is existing law. It's not that we couldn't change it, but if I change it here and I didn't change it back in the statute, I would again have an inconsistency, so it would also need to be changed in RSA, probably 65211. But I would want to look at that to make sure, but
Okay. And I guess with the part that we're striking over here, again, we're striking, I have a physical disability part, and we're just basically saying there's
well, I
concerns of
don't,
traveling because of the weather.
because there's an and in that sentence, okay? And we're talking about a person who has concerns over the weather, okay? Yesterday morning, certainly, when I was driving in, there was a section of Route 202 in Northwood that, you know, I was down to 20, 30 miles an hour to go over that section of the road. And it had nothing to do with disabilities, it had nothing to do with my driving skill. And, you know, I guess if I were running studded snow tires, I could have made out better, but I don't choose to do that. So that's why I didn't have a problem with that and the strikeout the way it is, because really we're talking about people and storm-related.
I always read that as, so you're, on a perfect, nice sunny day, perhaps your physical disability may not interfere with your ability to perhaps get to the voting station, but if you had, let's say, a snowstorm and you had mobility issues, that might actually then impact your ability to get there. So your physical disability is now preventing you from voting because of the storm, not necessarily just the fact that you have the disability. So that's why I kind of looked at the combination, but that just says now for weather purposes, for whatever reason.
Well, if you read the bottom of page 1, probably starting on line 27 through, it talks about the storm, it talks about, you know, the National Weather Service has to, and again, I do have a handicap plate that I can put in my car, but that's because of my knee, but that would not prevent me due to a storm to be able to get there. And like I say yesterday, if the roads from my house to the polling place were like the roads in Northwood were yesterday, I would consider that a reason, you know, for storm-related. But the problem is that when we're dealing with these storms, the only way I can look at it ahead of time, which is what I have to do, is from the weather forecast, and that's why the stuff about the National Weather Service is in there. And you can't do it, what is it, 72 hours somewhere, either here or in the regular statute, I think it is.
I think it's the day before. That was my next question was, this would only even apply in a sense that it was Monday, and we get a winter storm warning.
Yep.
Our primary, whether it stays in September or maybe hopefully moves to June, unlikely to have snow, I guess, but
Unlikely to apply, yeah.
unlikely to apply. All right.
So,
I'm inclined to not support it, but I can still be convinced.
well, since we're in executive session, if you would like time to further discuss this with the prime sponsor, I'm certainly willing to put this back in the stack and wait.
We can move it along because either way, without everyone here, it's not going to go on consent.
Yeah, I guess I'll just make the final point that, that it is very limited. I mean, you know, if we did have a winter storm warning, the advice, right, is to stay off the road. So we're telling our residents, stay home for public safety reasons, keep yourself safe, you know, but we're also asking them to exercise their civic duty. So I know we're all tough New Englanders, but I just think, you know, not presenting that extra challenge to folks, you know, where it's literally unsafe conditions is just a fair way to exercise our authority here.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
And the ayes have it. And it says 2-1. And Senator Perkins Quokka gets to take that out.
Sure thing.
Oop. Got the wrong sheet up. Oh, where was it? Yeah.
You'll have the whole session before this comes up to convince me.
That's right. I do. I got time. I'm going to work on an opus.
All right. Is there any of the other bills on our list?
Let's see. I don't know if you guys want Senator Murphy here to
I
vote.
guess I would like to at least talk about the Woodsville Fire
Yes.
District.
Yes, let's talk about it.
In the Woodsville Fire District, the amount of taxes that each community is paying seems to me to be a relevant item. I don't know what the two of you think about that particular part.
Personally, Chair, you know, having listened to everything, I I agree that's relevant, but there's also a pending court case, and so I know in other committees, I certainly have voted, and perhaps we were together on one of these, that, you know, to let the court process play out, and not intercede with a piece of legislation, but there's clearly many arguments to be raised on both sides, so.
Has the court given any indication of when they're going to rule?
It's a good question. I'm gonna look back through the hearing report.
Mr. Chairman, in reading the committee report, part of the motivation for this legislation is to kind of get past the hostility that's going on in that particular community. So even if the litigation resolves itself, it sounds like the hostility may still exist, for better or for worse. But I'm, you know, I haven't been following the litigation side, but maybe ending or resolving future litigation and hostility in that community might be. Might be an interest in doing that, rather than continuing to argue about the same thing every time this comes up.
I hear that.
All right. Going right up the list, relative to funding for school transportation services under the default budget. If there's a contract, then the default budget is already going to have the stuff from the contract in there. Anybody want to make any comments on that?
Chair, you're saying if there's a contract, it'll already be incorporated. I will remind you that we do have this amendment for a study committee on SB 447.
Who was, I don't remember that.
That
I
Senator
pulled out my
Chandler handed
folder.
out. Okay.
Who wrote the amendment?
The prime sponsor. Yeah.
I don't know yet.
Thank you.
Well, that's right. Chanley talked about that when she was in here, didn't she? And I asked her if she was volunteering to be the Senate member.
And she happily said yes.
Discussion?
Well, Chair, I would be inclined to move out to pass so we can discuss the amendment, but I believe that the prime sponsor felt there was some information that had come to light since she filed the bill that made it a better candidate to be further studied.
Okay, ought to pass by Senator Perkins Cook. I'll second it for discussion. You introduce the amendment, Senator
I'd-
Perkins Cook?
Yeah, I'd like to move Amendment 2024-0222S. Do I have a second?
And again, for discussion, I will second the amendment, the motion. Discussion? No problem. I didn't remember it either, Senator. I admit that, mea culpa, all that.
So I think that part of the concern is just, the change in transportation costs year to year. And so I think the senator felt that the existing contract may not fully sort of capture the concern. I agree with you, Chair, that if there was an existing contract, it would be captured in the default budget, but I'm inclined to honor the prime sponsor's request.
Looking to me for feedback, Mr. Chairman.
If you have any.
I don't always love committees. Sometimes they're essential, sometimes they're important. I think with it, sometimes we're too quick to form committees in this body. So,
Certainly, the default budget and how that is handled has been a subject that we have dealt with year after year after year. And therefore, these contracts that are ongoing, and you negotiate a new contract, and the contract is approved by the selectmen, but the contract is not approved by the voters necessarily. So I guess I don't have any strong objections to this particular amendment having a committee, and since we have a Senate volunteer, I'm fairly sure that I won't be assigned to it.
Mr. Chairman, what's happening now if there's a default budget in respect to school transportation?
It falls back on the existing statute, and the existing statute talks about whether or not you have an ongoing contract. But a lot of times those contracts, like with the teachers and other employees, are multi-year contracts. Now, the transportation could also be that way, and if it is that way, then it would be covered under the existing statute where you've got an existing contract in the default budget. You've already obligated your community to paying that extra fee for the next year to continue that contract. The problem, in my opinion, comes in when your contract has expired and now you don't have an approved contract that has gone, and that's something that this committee could look into.
I agree, Chair, and I also think part of what could be a concern is that, the default budget sort of expressly enumerates in the existing statute, contracts and other obligations previously incurred, and then it sort of differentiates that one-time expenditures would have been eliminated in the proposed budget, but if you don't have a multi-year transportation contract, which bucket does that fall into, and how does that coincide with the requirement to provide transportation under RSA 199.6? So I'm not sure the drafted language solves the problem, because it reads, student transportation services shall be funded at amount adequate to meet the requirements, except when circumstances would otherwise necessitate a reduction. I suspect that it's somewhat complicated, and I wouldn't want to set up a rule that, could lead to some very strong different opinions, I guess. So I think it would be better to be able to flesh the issue out more fully.
I think you raised a good point, that, number one, what happens if a contract's expiring, and then you can't, a default budget's not gonna be very helpful. The other hurdle you run into is you can't just have that, an impasse where it's unilaterally, extended, because that's a private company. We're just forcing them into a contract they can't get out of. And I would maybe put caution on the local communities to not wait for these contracts to be up like that, but at the same time, how to resolve that in statute,
Well,
maybe that's what needs to be studied.
I agree with you, Senator, but I believe that the way the statute is right now, if the multi-year contract expired, then the default budget would have the amount that was in the last year of that contract in the default budget. And until a special meeting was held or something else, that number couldn't rise unless it came from other monies. If the state provided, some money for something that was directly related, then you could go do it, or something else. But it's not just limited to the transportation costs. It would be the same issue for any labor or any other agreement out there. And so to single out transportation costs, I think is wrong, but to let them study it, I don't have a problem with them studying it.
Are communities waiting to the last second to extend these contracts? And I would be curious why they would put themselves in a...
Not that I know of, but again, remember, you haven't had the voters vote on that money. When they voted the year before, there was an existing contract out there, and they voted on the money that was in that budget based on that contract. Okay, you don't have that situation when you get to an expiring contract and then what you do for the next year in the default budget.
I'll support the adoption of the amendment. It changes the whole bill to a study commission, so I would support that. I'm not sure they're gonna be able to resolve it, but I'd be curious
Right.
what they come up with.
Any further comments?
I think the pending motion is
Okay.
on the amendment, right?
Pending motion is on the amendment to 0222S. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. And since this was Senator Chanley, I'll let you take it out again, Senator Perkins.
I think we need to vote on the underlying
Oh,
motion.
the auto passes amended. I apologize. Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and I'm still gonna let Senator Perkins take it back.
Happy to, Chair.
And do I have a motion to come out of executive session so that we can pick back up on the hearings?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Have a motion, second, to come out of executive session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. And in just a minute, we will start the next bill. goes down Route 11 into Rochester. Today, we've got Senate Bill 534 relative campaign finances, and there's lots of stuff in here. First thing I'd like to do is to give you a couple of editorial changes that need to be done, in my opinion. And the first one's on page 10. On line 34, page 10, it says, who has receipts or expenditure exceeding $1,000. Well, it doesn't tell you over what period. So to be consistent with the other language, it would be for the election cycle, should you decide to make that change. And page 12, at the top of page 12 on line 5, it says inspection and treasurers. To be consistent with the heading for line 6 of public inspection, I would propose that be public inspection and treasurers, because the line 12, if you look, is the treasurers, and also the committee treasurers on line 26. So, and then there's 2 items on page 13. Line 6, the RSA 664. The actual paragraph is 664:3. The 3 was left out. And on line 15, it says success of defeat, and we would like that to say success or defeat of any warrant article, etc. Okay, why this bill? There are many people who get quite frustrated over campaign finances and how it's done. You can have a candidate, you can have a candidate committee, you can have a political committee, you can have. So we tried to bring this down. And this extensive work was not done by me, it was done by others, and I think one of them is sitting behind me. And I'm sure she'll come up and talk. If not, we'll encourage her to come up and talk. But it makes quite a few changes. And the bill that we just heard previously about legibility can be rolled up into this. Certainly, it is the Secretary of State's opinion that not allowing facts of reports anymore would be advantageous. Certainly in the technology that we have right now, where people could take a picture with their phone and send that in. People could take scan the thing with their phone and send that in, and other things, and that the specifying that you can do it via facsimile, which is in the other bill, but could be also related to this, and cleaning up that statute. Certainly could be something that the committee may want to entertain. So with that, I will stop my testimony and take any questions.
Thank you, Senator. Questions? Senator Perkins-Coie.
Thank you. Might you have in your arsenal a document that shows each of the changes made to statute? I know we have sort of repealed and reenacted, but
I do have a red line copy somewhere.
okay.
Whether or not I can, other than, Xeroxing the copy I have or whatever, which I'm certainly willing to do. In fact, Deb, if you contact Deb, she can do it. And it is extensive, and there have been changes, so don't just rely on this if you do want it from my aide.
Okay. Yeah, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Any further questions?
Someone else may have it electronically, so I don't know.
Senator Perkins Cook.
Yeah, I guess, do you want to speak to any substantive changes specifically that are made here? I mean, do you view it primarily as cleanup? It sounds like you're talking about a little restructuring of the political and candidate committees.
Well, it does do a few things, and remember when I did the change on page 10, I told you for the election cycle. And that is a new concept that's in this, where previously it would say for the election, and the statute would have, you have, in an election cycle, you would have the primary, which would be an election, and then you'd have the general election, which would be in that same cycle. So it says, you know, when people go out and campaign, if there is a primary, how much do we care about separating that by election and having the amount of money that you can raise or how much donors can do? And again, I'll let the Secretary of State talk a little bit more about those kind of things, should she choose to. But, you know, we are trying to simplify the process some, to not make a distinction between a candidate and a candidate committee. Right now, between a candidate and a candidate committee, there are different days for when you have to make your reports, and those kind of things. Certainly, you know, I particularly like using the online system, because then I don't have to worry about alphabetizing my expenditures and receipts, because you know, if I'm doing it on my spreadsheet or doing it anywhere else, I used to get these notes from the Attorney General's office that I didn't follow the format by getting it alphabetized right, and I got tired of getting those, so I just used the online system. I know that a couple of my opponents, I have, you know, tried to make sure that they were following the law in a helpful way, not trying to, you know, do a gotcha. I'd give them a phone call and say, well, you know, you ought to go read this section of the law and the Attorney General's joint letter with the Secretary of State, and you may want to do this, do that, the other thing. So again, you know, should not be an adversarial portion of campaigning. Certainly, some people want to keep their donors private as much as they can. Well, hey, that ship has sailed. Right now, you know, the law is what the law is, and you need to report, and you need to report, you know, fully. Again, I think some of the things that we have, you know, about the reporting, you know, reporting the business and the title and all of this other stuff. There are times when looking at whether there's abuse of the system, you need to know that information, but I think there's time for it if there is abuse. But that's neither here nor there, and not really subject to the bills in front of you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Senator Gray. Chair recognizes Ms. Hennessy. Welcome back.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Erin Hennessy. I am Deputy Secretary of State. This bill came about from a lot of work that the House did over the summertime. They had a subcommittee of their election law committee, bipartisan, that met to go over all of 664, and in detail, many meetings, many hours of work. Several members of the public came to watch this, and we're very happy that this was being looked at. In my almost 2 years with the Secretary of State's office, I have to say that there is a lot of confusion by the users of the campaign finance laws around when they have to report, how long they have to report for, that they have to register, not just file reports. As a former user of of campaign finance laws when I was in the House and the Senate. I also find a lot of the language in our current statute confusing, overly verbose. So I'd like to just point out a few of the sections that simplify the language for users of this and hopefully make it more transparent for the end users of the system that go in to look at the information. I want to point out that this bill is not the recommendation that our office gave to the House committee at the end of their subcommittee hearings, but it is very similar. I do have a few changes that I would like to see made to make sure that things stay consistent throughout the statute. And then I also am going to point out some of the changes that were made. In current statute, there was some things that weren't defined, like candidate committee was not defined in current statute, yet we have candidate committees. A lot of the different political committees were not defined very well, so we put all of that information into one area of the statute. I'm trying to find it. Just to make it more clear what an actual political committee is and what the options are for the users. One of my favorite changes that was made, that is also in this bill, was when you need to file your reports as a registered candidate or political committee. Right now in statute, we have paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs of timing of when these reports need to be filed. And if you look at page 9, it goes into very short details of when these reports need to be filed. I love bullet points. These are actually letters, but they're less than a sentence long each, less than a line long each of how long it needs to, when you need to file your reports. As Senator Gray mentioned previously, the election cycle was broken up in between periods between elections. There was an exploratory period, there was the primary period, there was general election period. It was very confusing to users when they could accept funds for each of those, how much those funds would be, how to report them on their campaign finance forms. And so in this bill, it changes to the election cycle, which is 2 years. So in between each of the general election, there's a stopping point in time. This bill puts the stopping point at 21 days after the general election, when the next election cycle will begin. So that allows people to file their final reports, and if they have money left in their campaign finance system reporting, or if they have a deficit, they are automatically re-registered for the next campaign finance election cycle. So we do have a lot of calls to our office, especially after the AG did a lot of work on looking at reports in the past year, where if someone is not running for office anymore, they don't realize that they need to continue to file their reports until they have a zero balance, either because they had a positive or a deficit balance when they were running for office. So I think a lot of this language clarifies and makes it a lot easier for people to understand what they need to do, when they need to do it, and for how long they need to do it for. One of the changes that was made in this bill that I didn't hear come up in the subcommittee during the summertime in the House was that it changes the language of success or defeat to support, opposition, promotion, or attack. But it doesn't do it across the whole statute. So in some places we use the word success or defeat. In some places we use support, opposition, promotion, or attack. I would like to see the language go back to the original language of success or defeat. We have not, to my knowledge, had any misunderstandings in campaign finance what success or defeat means. And in putting in additional adjectives about what a campaign mailer would be doing, support, opposition, promotion, or attack, versus just success or defeat. Why wouldn't you put the word praise in there if you're using attack? So I think keeping it very simple with success or defeat is very clear. And again, I haven't heard that there's misunderstanding about what success or defeat means. Additionally, there were a few just places that there's some typos or inconsistencies, and I'm happy to get you my suggested changes to the committee. One of them, two of the bigger ones, I would say, are on page 7, where on line 2, it brings back in some of the old information about the exploratory, primary, and general election phases for when persons or corporations can donate amounts. It doesn't say contributed to. I believe that's supposed to be a candidate, but that we don't define the election cycle as that anymore, so that's would not be defined and would be difficult to program our campaign finance system in 2 different ways. Also, I think we would be reverting back to the confusion where candidates or people who are trying to donate don't understand what those phases of an election cycle actually mean. And then on the bottom of page 7, there's a new section starting on line 35 that is covered already in a different section. So I don't think lines 35 on the bottom of page 7 through line 4 on the top of page 8 is needed. And again, I can send an email to the committee to detail all of this out if you think it's simpler that way. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Senator Perkins Coca.
I would, if you would circulate that to the committee.
My pleasure.
Any further questions? See none. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank Senator Gray for it makes the users, it much easier for the users, candidates and committees, but also the people that look at the fine line.
Thank you. Organizes.
Members of the committee, for the opportunity to speak here today. For the record, my name is Greg Moore. I'm a regional director. First of all, I'd like to say, I'd like to thank the sponsor for bringing this legislation. RSA is done. We actually made it an effort at that in 2012 to try to clean instances. We got it through the House. Senator Murphy might remember that. Didn't make it through the Senate, unfortunately, but I think it's a worthy step. I will add one aside though about the language about success, defeat, or attack. I think the reason why that's included in there is because the section that is addressing relates to the functional equivalent of express advocacy. As you may know, express advocacy is when you are promoting the success or defeat. The functional equivalent of express advocacy is not when you're using the magic words as are brought up in Buckley v. Vallejo, but instead are speaking to a candidate's character or fitness for office, but not actually using the magic words. That actually was something that was brought in the 2008 McConnell decision, and New Hampshire started regulating it in 2014, but it specifically doesn't speak to success or defeat, and instead speaks to someone's individual character. And the state does regulate that, so that might be part of the reason why they expanded that language for that in particular. The reason why I'm here to testify is specific to page 6, lines 17 through 19. The further disclaimer that would be added for nonprofit organizations. The primary issue is that there are a number of tax-exempt organizations that are not covered under this section. So we think that adding the part about the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 is probably misleading. And I think that it'd probably be better to bring that down to this organization is not required and chooses not to disclose their donors. So I would actually strike the reference to the Internal Revenue Code of 1986. But as it relates specifically to the issue of disclaimers, One of the things I looked at is just sort of the overall amount of real estate that this is starting to take up. And then maybe this isn't so much an issue on mailers, but on as it relates to, for example, digital ads, like banner ads. Adding this just adds a lot more real estate in terms of these types of ads. Some thoughts about that. One of the things that at the federal level the FEC says is, so in our state law, if you're doing an independent expenditure, you have to include a street address, a mailing address. Well, under federal law, it could be a mailing address, a phone number, or a website. So again, if you're, and I say this because first of all, I acknowledge that almost nobody reads the disclaimers. Heck, we put a logo on there that's probably 5 times the size of the disclaimer, and still the candidates we endorse tell us that their constituents come to them and they say that they sent a great mailer, even though there's a giant AFP New Hampshire logo on there. But I think that to the extent that the longer you make the disclaimer, the less likely it is to be read. There's actually a fairly strong body of academic evidence, which is, as I'm sure an attorney like Senator Abbas knows, is the reason why terms of use tend to be like 20 pages long, because if you got an app and it just read, we're going to take all your personal information and we're going to sell it to everyone and anyone we could, you probably might think twice about signing up for it. But then again, they give you a 22-page terms of use document. You just breeze right through it and sign off on it. So in terms of, again, the part about the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 we think might be misleading. Secondly, maybe the idea of shifting away from adding a street address and say an address, a phone number, or a website, similar to what the FEC does for independent expenditures, might be another area to sort of like shrink up that real estate, tighten it up, and give more of an opportunity. Because you know, I mean, you're talking about like banner ads. First of all, I have to admit I'm a little jealous. Planned Parenthood's lawyers allow them to go to like 6-point font. Our lawyers won't let us do that. So I'll admit to a degree of jealousy. Although if you had this language, they might go to a 4-point font. And again, I don't think our lawyers will let us do that, but maybe they will. But I think that just tightening up this language relative to disclaimer, I think is something that would benefit, that actually would benefit the voter, as opposed to just adding more words. So those are my thoughts. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Any questions? Senator Gray.
Would you believe that if I PDF the thing, then on my touchscreen, all I have to do is pinch my fingers and spread them apart, that 4-point font becomes legible?
Senator, if you could like put that in a memo to our attorneys and I can ship it to them, I would very much appreciate that.
Any further questions? See none. Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Thanks.
Chair recognizes Ms. Zink from Open Democracy. Welcome back.
Good morning, members of the committees. For the record, my name is Olivia Zink, the Executive Director for Open Democracy, and I live in the city of Franklin. This does provide increased transparency, and I want to thank the prime sponsor for doing cleanup. This past spring, I spent hours in the House subcommittee. The Attorney General presented some information, as well as the Secretary of State, and I think that the 2 memos that they produced about what pieces of the statute should be cleaned up. I want to speak, page 12 and 14 talks about sort of the changing fiscal agent to treasurer. I think using one word throughout the statute is a really good idea, and not having 2 words. I do think that there might be people who have lawn signs that are printed from prior elections that might say fiscal agent. So I don't know if you are still going to allow them to take those signs out of the garage, or you'll need them to put new, sticky notes over them. But I think that is a great change, having one word, not multiple words meaning the same thing. I do want to speak a little bit to page 7, line 22, the success and defeat of the candidates. There is the sort of acronym PASO, promote, attack, support, or oppose. Those 4 words is a legal framework that those words have been litigated a lot more than just success and defeat. So I think that maybe looking at some of that arguments around using the words promote, attack, support, and oppose, or creating a definition of what success and defeat means, and then you can add in additional words. The other thing the Attorney General has spoke about is deficits and reporting of deficits. And when you look at how candidates report deficits and surpluses, it seems like they're reported differently based on who's filing the report. And so the language on deficits is really helpful in this. And that's all I had for to take any questions if I can.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions for Ms. Zink? Seeing none, thank you very much. That is everyone signed up to speak. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on Senate Bill 534? And seeing none, close the hearing.
And as soon as everybody's ready, we'll open the hearing on Senate Bill 490.
It is a lot of stickers. Maybe some sort of grandfather.
Okay. Senator Avard was here. Do you know who Senator Avard is? See if he's out there. And tell him that we request his presence. So I'll open the hearing on Senate Bill 490, and the prime sponsor is here, and we'll ask him to introduce himself and the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. For the record, I'm Senator Kevin Avard, the prime sponsor of this bill, and just multitasking this morning with lots of bills. This bill came as a request of some of my constituents who've been watching the checklist and came up with some issues that I thought warrant a bill like this. And in essence, in the analysis, the bill changes the verification of the checklist from every 10 years to every 2 years. And I know that there's individuals here that want to testify on it, but one of the things that has come to mind, Mr. Chair and committee members, is if the checklist isn't cleaned up and names are on the checklist, it can create an ability for individuals to cheat. So I had seen a snapshot of one particular checklist in the town of Hollis, and there were about 7 or 8 different names that lived at one resident over a 10-year period that have not been cleaned up, and for the year 2020. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. How come it hasn't been cleaned up? All these individuals were on the checklist. And I thought that was bizarre. And then I saw another example of the same. So in the spirit of everybody that is concerned about our elections these days and wanting them to be pure and accurate, I brought this bill in just so that maybe we can have a tool to clean up the checklist so that there's no conspiracy theories or anything of that nature. And it would be a way to make sure that they're a little bit more accurate. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Questions from committee members? Senator Perkins Coca.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Senator, for being here. So I think, we all want the checklist to be accurate. We share that goal. Having been someone who's run for office a bunch of times now, I've done a lot of canvassing, and you go out with your little checklist, and I guess nowadays it's an app, but I started with a checklist, and, some voters would have to miss an election, and I know having 3 little kids, like maybe somebody's homesick, you're trying to figure it out, you miss one. I'm concerned that updating the checklist every 2 years and having to make sure that people voted within 2 years might remove people who miss like 1 election or 2 elections. So I guess my question to you would be is, do you think it's necessary to happen every 2 years, or could it potentially happen every 4 or 6 years, just to make sure that we're not
That is a good question. I really don't know how to answer that because of the material that was brought before me, and I know that there'll be a discussion on that. I think it may be an imposition, but I think voter confidence in our elections is more than anything. I mean, if the spirit of the day right now, everybody's questioning, right? It might help to bring a little bit more unity and trust, because I think that's waning at this point. And so it might be an inconvenience to have to re-register, but that might be a point of discussion. That's all. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Additional questions? I might not go with 2 years, but could go 5 years, which would still line up with the 10-year requirement. But this is going to be additional work on all the towns. It will cause them to send in a lot of 30-day letters. If anybody knows what a 30-day letter is, and a lot of other things.
So on that.
Comments on those?
Yeah, on that 30-day issue, I think one of the things that, whether it's, I don't think it's your town that's doing this, but I know that there are other towns that say, you know what, we're not going to send out the 30-day letters because the state's going to do it. And that's their default. Yes. That'll be part of the testimony that's coming up. And it's an interesting, to me, that I thought that was a revelation. And from testimonies of people that are actually doing the checklist, it was their own words. So that was concerning to me as well. Whether it's 2 or 5 years, I'll depend on your wisdom. But I think shortening it up, making it a little bit more aggressive as far as the cleanup, and making sure that the local people that are elected to do the checklist will be able to. Is that me? You're up when you're ready. I am up when I'm ready. So there are some people that are a lot smarter than me that can answer a lot of the questions. But that is a topic that will most likely come up in further discussion.
All right, any other questions I have, I'll defer till later. Anybody else have additional questions? Thank you,
Thank you,
Senator.
Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee members.
And looks like Raul. Hard to read the last name, so I'm not going to try it.
Raul Blanchet,
Okay,
French background.
all right,
Cuban as
and you're
well.
from?
Uh,
You want to state your name and where you're from?
Yes, my name is Raul Blanchet from Hollis, New Hampshire. Mr. Chair and select committee members, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. This topic is a result of, and this bottom line up front, if you will, is a result of a roughly 2-year investigation into how the SOCs in our town conducted themselves and conducted election processes. And in essence, they were following RSA guidance to their best interpretation. And as a result, there was a lot more activity that needed to be done. Let me just read my remarks, and I'll answer any questions.
We would rather you paraphrase them because if you pass in your testimony, it will go to the senators and they can read it at their leisure. So
Okay.
paraphrasing it is much more.
So basically, I'm in support of this bill, and the recommendation of 2 years versus 10 years was the result of this 2-year investigation. And I believe that the SOCs need a little more discipline to conduct their businesses. And if you, by way of background, in Hollis, I'm the vice chair of the budget committee for the co-op school system. I'm also cemetery trustee. And as a cemetery trustee, I'm the one who writes the meeting minutes. And faithfully, we write them on a monthly basis. We meet those activities. We meet once a month and more if necessary. When I started this investigation and tried to compare and contrast the 24 departments in Hollis and how they did their business and how they presented information to the public, we found that there were a lot of what I call infractions. The RSAs were not being followed. Meeting minutes were non-existent. They were not publishing information on the webpage. And so there was what appeared to be lack of trust in the process because the public wasn't really informed. By way of background, I've been working over 51 years with the Department of Defense. My company has recently been involved in evaluating and assessing the trust that the public has on national elections using technical means. For example, we have an expert on cryptography that has been involved in looking at ways in which we can improve the trust that the public places on elections from a technical perspective. In having a conversation with him, we realized that there are two approaches to this, the technical approaches as well as the human processes. When you combine, you can create synergy and improve the work. From a technical perspective, creating trust is very difficult. Those are the findings of those studies. So our motivation has been, can we find a way to perhaps change the RSAs to encourage the SOCs to do a better job? And by a better job, I mean more frequent meetings, more frequent meeting minutes. In the case of Hollis in particular, if you were to have, for example, monthly meetings, on average, the number of voters that were to change in the list, we're talking about anywhere between 5 and 10 names. If you wait 2 or 3 months, which that was the case before 2022, for their meetings, you will find that now you're dealing with dozens of names and dozens of 30-day letters. And so when you start creating a situation where it's up to them to decide how frequent they want to meet, you will find that eventually these names that shouldn't be on the list begins to grow, and it becomes a more difficult process. So part of our demotivation for 2 years versus 4 or 5 is we need to start establishing a process that's disciplined, where everybody, all the SOCs across the state, follows a more standard approach. As part of this recommendation, and it's something that the SOS, the Secretary of State, should implement, we're talking about perhaps better training sessions, perhaps sharing information on best practices. There are a lot of things that can be done to improve the processes. But in essence, I support the idea of reducing the purging period at the state level to a much closer approach so that it will begin to place the secretaries, the supervisors of the checklist in a more disciplined pattern. I have remarks that I can leave with you, 5 copies, and I can pass them around. And I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And the next one on the list is Al.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate this opportunity, and I do request possibly that you could ask that question you asked Senator Vard, because I believe I can answer that. Okay. Our findings in Hollis reveal a startling reality that between 1 in 5 and 1 in 4 names on our particular voter rolls were illegitimate. As you know, the state of New Hampshire's 10-year purge successfully removed 250,000 names. Considering the state's small population of 1.3 million and factoring in the significant portion of people aged 17 and under, we're essentially cleaning up an incredibly high percentage of voters on our list. Because some cities and towns do an absolutely fabulous job, this highlights that a substantial level of inaccuracy remains across the remaining towns. One must ask why and what can we do to help mitigate things. In Hollis alone, in 2020, we had a U.S. Census population of 8,342 people. Our supervisor of the checklists, the 3 of them, signed off their names to declare that we had 7,700 people on our voter rolls. On the surface, this was outrageously high, and the voter tally in that particular year at the presidential election in November, 5,890, demonstrating to us on the surface we had a 76% voter turnout. With the population in Hollis of 17 and under, we knew that the voter rolls should range before analysis between 5,700 and 6,300, not the 7,700. In fact, the imminent state purge culled 1,390 names to be removed. Since this happened within just a short period after the election and with very few in moves and out moves as far as our population and housing market, the state's 10-year purge demonstrated that we had a very good possibility of a 93% voter turnout. Upon further investigation, we discovered a list on our own of 500 names of people, citizens who had lived in Hollis, who submitted to the U.S. Post Office permanent change of address requests to move out of Hollis and have their mail forwarded. We then presented this to our checklist folks and then encouraged them to do a cleanup. They looked into this, and of course they also had some assistance with a new program that comes from the Secretary of State's office to help in this process. As of December 2023, we are now down to 6,006 people. This showing the possibility of too high, 98% voter turnout. I then went to the town hall and pulled the building permits for the last 4 years. We had 200 homes over, actually. So there's a possibility now that we need to analyze that we have 200 to 400 more new registrants that have should be on our ballots. Since we're at 6,006, and that's only 116 more people than who actually voted in 2020, this really needs a serious look. This could demonstrate over 100% turnout. We don't want to be in these type of possibilities. This is outrageous, and it just suggests how important regular cleaning of the voter rolls are. Numbers like this are not acceptable. To further drive home why we need state intervention, we learned from one of our 3 supervisors of the checklist that they in Hollis, quote, refrain from sending out 30-day letters because they know the state will do the work for them, end quote. Another checklist person is quoted as saying, quote, we knew we were not sending out 30-day letters on a timely basis, end quote, and, quote, knew the voter rolls were overinflated, end quote. So you can see the variable problem we have here of human activity affecting the efficacy of our list. Approval of this measure will help take the accuracy to a new level, ensuring confident integrity in the process. Without attention, controversy in each election becomes inevitable. And to address your question to the senator, if we do not change the way we do the cleanup and we let it float, that means that the people who you were worried about, the time frame, if they didn't vote for a couple of years, we are now, right now, we arbitrarily say at the 10-year mark, this is when we do it. And they could also have had to babysit and do these things, so they couldn't. So in a way, the problem you're talking about, it already exists now. If we do this on a constant basis, the criteria will just float every 2 years. So you won't really be changing the problems that exist now. You won't be increasing them. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions from committee members? I will ask questions.
Please.
Certainly, I would be more in favor of doing it every 5 years with a 4-year look back, but that wouldn't preclude you to do it every 2 years. But again, I would want at least a 4-year look back because we have a large number of voters that only vote in a presidential election. Comment on those?
I agree with you. We don't really need to change too much. We just need to do what we're doing more frequently. Pretty straightforward and simple.
Okay, seeing no other questions, thank you very much. Tony? I could try it, but I don't know that I'd be successful.
Stenizzi.
Stenizzi?
Yes.
All right.
I'm going to pass these around. I know you'd rather I paraphrase, but it's easier to look at the illustrations. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, thank you very much for allowing us this opportunity to speak to you about this very important bill that we're trying to create here. If you look at the illustrations, it becomes so clear exactly what we're talking about, and I can move through it very quickly.
Pull the mic a little towards you. There you go.
Yeah. For the record, my name is Tony Stenizzi of Hollis, New Hampshire. And I took a random sample I don't know who these people are. I really didn't know where they lived per se. I knew the streets and so on. But I pulled a name, as you can see in the first name, Mr. Rutherford. When you typically go into register, this is what you get. When you grab a ballot, this is what you see. And the question really comes up, is this accurate? But if you look at the address of 27 Flint Pond Road, you'll see a number of names that come up. The names are 7 other voters with 5 different family names, last names. So the question you look at, is this right? Is this accurate? I don't know who belongs on the list or who doesn't. I can't tell from the information I have. This is purely an observation of what the list looks like when you start to dig into it a little bit. The next illustration 2, again, is based on the checklist in Hollis, New Hampshire. I pulled a name, and I did pull a name that the last name was Bergeron, because it's a common name, like Smith in some places, Bergeron in New Hampshire there are a lot of them. And again, I looked at it and I pulled this particular name, and it looks fine at first look. But when you look at it by address, you see 9 people living at the same address with 5 different families' names. To me, this is a concern. I'm not making a claim of anything more than an observation, because I don't know, but it's worth looking at. It opens the doors for opportunities, nefarious opportunities, or not, but what's accurate? The third example, I picked a name, and I even did a copy of a house. What does this house look like? Where this one person on Silver Lake Road, which is a very busy street, you really can't park on the street. It looks like one person lives there, and a very small house. But when you look at it in detail, you see that there are 6 different names, 5 different families. And these names that are created stay on the list up to 10 years. This is 10 years of opportunity for something to go wrong. It's clear, it's there. Every 10 years when you do a purge, this is the accumulation of an inflated list that you could be looking at. The last name, I do know the person. It wasn't random. I just wanted to look at it to see what a family member looks like. And I know, because it's my family, that they lived in this house in 2018, my daughter and her husband. When you look at it by their address, and some of you may recognize the last name, it's not important. I know that 4 people don't belong on the list because they moved. They were no longer a resident after 2018. They were on the list of 2022. This is how you get inflated rolls. This is how you end up in the potential for nefarious activities. I'm not saying that they are, but it's one of those things, if you have an inclination along with an opportunity, you typically act on your inclination. That could be a good thing if you want to donate money to a charitable cause. Your inclination is to donate. If you have extra money, there's the opportunity to act on your inclination. If your inclination is nefarious and you have an opportunity, the outcome is there. Now, because these houses, except for the last one is an owner, is rental property, you start looking at some of the state statistics in these matters, and you see that it's growing dramatically. That there were, excuse me, a little hoarse. There were over 6,890 multifamily dwellings and growing. And when you have opportunities such as high-density housing, there is a large transient population. And so this sort of expanding, inflating the voting list, it's got to happen. If we're doing it the way we're doing it, we can expect the same results. Now, I know you asked for 5 years. I agree that you got two mutually exclusive situations. When should people be taken off the rolls is different than how often you should try to clean the rolls. And I believe it can be accomplished with a 4-year look back, but looking to purge every 2 years. Now,
Questions from committee members?
yes, welcome.
I thought you were done.
I am. I think this, like you said, anyone can take the opportunity to read the information that's available. And I have percentages and data and those sorts of things that I would bore you unless you wanted me to answer some of these questions. I'd be more than pleased to.
We'll see if the senators have any questions. Seeing none, thank you very much.
My
Next
pleasure.
one
Thank you.
on the list, it looks like the last name is Brown, maybe? Okay, not speaking, all right. Deputy Secretary of State, I think I've got some questions for you, if nobody else. If you'd introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Erin Hennessy. I am the Deputy Secretary of State. I'm happy to answer questions, but also give you some information as well. Start with information. Okay.
Certainly.
Thank you. As many of you may know, we have a new statewide voter registration system that will go live hopefully later this spring. With that will come more integrated information for our supervisors or registrars of our checklist, including the national change of address information that we get from the Postal Service that notes when someone has permanently moved from their address. We will also have vital records death information linked into that, so supervisors will see that information along with the change of address information in the system rather than getting that information in different formats delivered to them. So it's going to be much easier for them to update the voter checklist to keep it consistent with people who may have passed away or who have moved out of their polling location. We also have more information, more towns and cities using e-poll books, and ultimately these e-poll books will be able to be uploaded directly into the statewide voter registration system, making information on who voted more accurate because we're taking out the human element. And all of these things will make our rolls more consistent and accurate and more up to date. In reviewing the language of the bill, we would recommend a 6-year time period. We do have many people, hundreds of thousands, that vote only every 4 years when they show up for the general election when the president is on the ballot. So we would recommend that even though these voters do not choose to vote in primaries or other general elections or maybe city or town elections, that they do choose to consistently vote and that they be remain on the checklist. So to your point of at least having a 4-year look back, we would agree with that. Happy to take questions.
Questions, Senator Murphy?
Thank you, Ms. Hennessy. Here was a scenario that I faced personally, and I want to know, will this database solve the problem? In 2006, I ran for a House seat. It was Ward 3 in Manchester, which was highly transient. And I, being a first-time candidate, didn't know to write "or current resident" on the envelopes when I mailed my literature. So I usually sent one to every voter, about 900 mail pieces. I got back almost 400 of them. And I thought, well, that's a very high return rate. And so I actually had someone sit in the polls, and that person counted about 28, actually exactly 28, I remember the number, 28 people on that list from 400 that came in and voted that day. And when she talked to the supervisor checklist, what she was told was, they talked to the voters, and the voters said, well, we just moved down the street, and or in some cases to Derry and stuff, but we just always vote here. So it wasn't malintent. It wasn't that they meant to vote in the wrong place. They just vote there because they've always voted there. And of course, then I gave my 400 mail pieces to the city clerk, and they cleaned up the voter list. But that was almost 45% of the voter list was bad in Ward 3 in Manchester in 2006. So Will this database solve this problem? That's what I want to hear.
Will the update to the statewide voter registration database, is that your question, solve the problem?
Yes, ma'am.
I would say that as long as someone has put into the Postal Service a permanent move, change of address, then yes, that would solve the problem. If they have not put a permanent move into the change of address with the Postal Service, then and there's been no other reason for the supervisors to send a 30-day letter to them, and they were not cleaned during the previous 10 years cleanup, then I don't believe that would fix the issue.
Follow up.
Follow up?
So if somebody moves away but doesn't submit the change of address, and by the way, a lot of these voters were elderly. Maybe they moved to a retirement community and didn't change or something like that. If someone moves away, doesn't submit a change of address, and then they continue to vote every 4 years, they're going to get re-registered. They're going to do that forever or until something happens. And so we have an issue in the state where we have some number of people, some unknown number of people voting in the wrong place, not necessarily through malintent, just because they don't know any better and it's habit.
I do want to say that when a voter checks in, the law is that they have to state their name and their address to the ballot clerk, and the ballot clerk has to repeat the name and address to them. So if they are stating their name and address and it doesn't match what's on the checklist, then the moderator will assist them in finding the appropriate polling location. I spoke with a moderator that the same situation happened to recently, where a voter didn't realize that they didn't just continue to vote in the location they had always voted in, and he gave them the address and directions information how to get to the new polling location.
I just want to say one thing. I'm going to give you a hard time. I know you're doing your best, and this is a tough situation. I just, anything we can do you have any ideas on how we can change this to solve this problem? Because I see it as a real problem. I mean, we need to restore voter confidence in our elections, and the scenario that I saw and what these gentlemen have produced is pretty substantial. And so I just want to make sure that we're doing everything we can as a legislature to address voter confidence in our elections.
Thank you. I'm not quite sure if that was a question or not, but I can say that our office is doing everything we can to address voter confidence, which includes upgrading our system, integrating the national change of address system into the new system, integrating vital records information into the new system, so it makes it much easier for supervisors or registrars to update their voter checklists locally. To the point where someone made a comment that a supervisor said that they'll wait for the state to do it. We do not update voter checklists. That is the job of the local supervisor or the registrar to do that.
Thank you, Ms. Hennessy.
Senator Adams.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would this new online system have access to the RMV records? So if someone were to change or get a new driver's license and have a different address, would that be able to work itself out? And if not, is that something that it could be expanded on perhaps in the future?
I'll have to look into that. I do not believe that we have DMV look up Senator Gray.
Right now, there is a prohibition against using the DMV and combining it with the voter list, except for when you are choosing jurors. We tried to change that a couple of years ago, and due to privacy considerations, the House voted it down.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just a couple of yes or no questions. The use of the poll books, you mentioned that. If we combine that with mandatory IDs, would that help you to purge would it help to make sure the addresses and stuff of the voters was correct?
So when a voter checks in, I would say that the poll books definitely would help to update the checklist. To Senator Abbas's question about the DMV, when a voter checks in and hands their license, if they have gone to the DMV and gotten a new license and change of address, their new address will be on their license. And so a ballot clerk, when they see that, will instruct the person that they're no longer registered, no longer living in that city, town, ward, or polling location, and that they will refer them to the moderator. Is that what you were asking?
Again, that's, what I'm saying is that the process that we use, if we require mandatory IDs, helps to make sure that the address that is in the voter database is correct, and therefore allows us to make sure they're voting in the proper place. Anyway, I'll go to another question. The next question is, when a person who has previously registered anywhere in the state goes to register, is that identified when they, whether they tell you that they're registered in Hollis or not, you know, is that identified when they go to put that into the statewide database?
Thank you for the question. As long as the person has given the same information, so if my name is Erin Hennessy and I put my name in as Ari Hennessy, those two persons might not match up. But the more information that we do where the voter inputs the information themselves, for example, with the new portal potential that's out there where a voter would input their information and then the supervisors would review and click to have that information added to the checklist, the more accurate it would be.
A voter who registers out of state, if I believe there's many states that actually do forward that information back to us, that if they register, tell them that they voted last in New Hampshire, is that information updated in the database?
Yes, that would be given through the database to local election officials.
Okay, just trying to highlight some of the good things you do. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone who did not ask to speak that wants to change their mind? Seeing none. How many people did we have sign up online?
Online, there are 23 signed up in support and 5 opposed.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, we will close the hearing on this bill. And I would like to go back into executive session if I had a motion.
So moved.
We have a motion, a second to go into executive session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. We are in executive session. Okay. If you pass that down. And I know that the three of us really haven't talked about these bills, so if there is anybody who wants to go into a committee or into a conference during this discussion, just need to tell me, but we will do that. On the list, we were up to, I guess I didn't. All right, we talked about the school transportation one. I was going from the bottom on the list of the bills to be exact. Senate Bill 446, that one, I am definitely not in favor of it. I don't know if there's any discussion from anyone else.
I would agree with you, Mr. Chairman, and I would move ITL.
Second.
Okay.
All the headaches of instant runoff voting with none of the benefits.
All right.
And it's amazing how you saw in some states, they have such a difficult time counting all the votes. It takes them 2 weeks. The election's been done for 2 weeks. They're still counting. Imagine if you add this on top of that. I just think of that. It's going to create a lot more problems than solutions.
All right, any other discussion? All right, the motion is ITL, made by Senator Murphy, seconded by Senator Perkins Quokka. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it, 4-0. And Senator Murphy, would you like to take that one out?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Continuing on. Establishing a voter-owned election fund for eligible candidates. This one here, certainly I think that the state's money should be spent for good things, and this may be a good thing, but we are in the middle of a budget cycle. And because we are in the middle of that budget cycle, I can't support the bill. And, you know, I know that they singled out one particular candidate, but when you look at this and the way it's structured, just a matter of how much time it would take to administer these certificates and other things and then distribute the money, that unless there is considerable money done, that we're going to spend much, much more on the administration of this than the candidates would reap as a benefit. In fact, in the prior years, we've actually taken out the language that we had prior about having a limit where the candidates could collect money up to that limit, but they would be limited to that amount and not, comments from other people?
I concur.
This is, Mr. Chairman, I always just thought doing this for only executive council, I'm not saying I support this. I understand the motivation for it, perhaps genuine, but realistically speaking, to micromanage it to this level, the enforcement of that, I don't know how this would even operate if it was actually the law. And I think it would make it very difficult. And a lot of the, there's different ways to run campaigns. I think we gotta leave that to the candidate. But having the state control the money that's fundraised, I don't see that operating very well in reality.
Further comments?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And, you know, I know you and I discussed this briefly, and it is a lot of work, and it is, we did get an updated fiscal note that that doesn't provide us with a ton of information, but, you know, I guess on the other side, you know, you do need to start somewhere, and I think we're all aware of the ways that you know, just the increasing amount of money spent in politics is affecting things. So, you know, I would be inclined to try a pilot program, and, you know, this is a realistic way to get one started where the House is so big and, you know, the Senate races are large. But I certainly understand the concerns being raised.
Again, we're in the middle of a budget cycle. And although this is supposed to depend upon money that's coming in, if I establish this program, whether the money comes in or not, I'm going to have to pay the people that would be administering this. And so, for nothing else but ill timing, I can't support the bill. So, I will make the motion of ITL. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second, ITL. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
And a vote of 3-1, and I will take that out. Okay. 384, relative to municipal loan and grant program for rental housing and making appropriation therefore.
So, Mr. Chairman, I believe we discussed an amendment to this bill in the hearing. I don't have status update on that amendment, but I believe it was something you had requested and
I had
supported.
discussions with a lot of people on this, and
Okay.
the way the bill is right now, I can't support it because it has, and there isn't enough detail in here for me to exactly know what's going on, okay? Because it's, let me look at it. We're doing medium income, but for the purpose of land acquisition, and stuff. So it is an FN, and we do need to deal with it. I'm certainly not going to expend the effort to put into here something that I'm very leery of, at least. I think that if the bill came through and had a program similar to either the 79E or to the TIF kind of thing, and the reason the TIF is hard is because usually in the TIF you have some kind of a developer that is already planning on doing something. But in this, and then also in the 79E, you usually have an owner of the property. And so things should be changed. But again, if we can, in the case of Keene, where they wanted to take a piece of property or buy a piece of property, clean that property up, and then do something with it, and it was unclear how they were going to transfer that land back to the developer. But if the developer wouldn't buy the land now and spend the money, then why would a developer buy the land at a price where the city or town was going to clean it up? And if he doesn't pay that price for both the land and the cleanup, then are we granting that landlord some kind of a benefit, for this by doing a 79E? At least I could use the taxes on the improvement of the property to pay for that difference, because I would be getting that revenue from the developer that way, because now he has a commitment to do it. But this bill doesn't do that. And I haven't seen anybody come to me and say that they wanted to. So unless there's further discussion, I will make a motion.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I just want to raise one point of caution, and I don't think this was the intent of anyone who supports this, but by providing loans and grant money to municipalities to acquire land that's privately owned, I understand, that can lead to some disputes, eminent domain type of thing, where often that such actions avoided because of the cost. Now, I understand there are circumstances where this could benefit a community, and it happens quite frequently. I know it happened to a property in Salem where I reside, but at the same time, just creating that, the funds to do that for municipalities, I would just, it's a cautionary thing to keep an eye on.
Senator Perkins Coker?
Thank you, Chair. If the committee would be amenable, I would ask that we just hold this for one more week to give the prime sponsor an opportunity to provide some kind of amendment and see if he could reach something that the chair would be open to considering, or are other members of the committee.
hold till,
I will take your
and
feedback.
what's our next
in
meeting
mind.
date? Must be the 5th or 6th or something? 6th?
Thank you.
Without objection? Okay.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Continuing up the list, relative to election recounts and audits, 82. That one is, this was your more simple one. When we, between your aid and mine, set up a time when we talk about the other one, Senator Perkins Coca,
Yeah.
and we'll try to put that in there and hold this one until later.
I think that makes sense.
And the bill we're talking about is 498 is putting that in there.
I think it's 489, sir.
489.
Thank
Pardon
you.
my dyslexia.
No worries.
Okay, 381, prohibiting municipalities from designating a road as a private road. I was surprised when I read this, the way it came through. Originally, I thought that the issue is that towns, when somebody did a development, that the town did not want the road in that development to be a public road, and therefore, when they zoned it, that they made that a condition that it be a private road, and therefore people being on that private road were subject to the maintenance costs of the private road through an association. This bill, the way it's written, has a whole bunch of stuff in it. But when you go back and look at the rest of the statute about class 4, class 5, class 6 roads, and roads leading to summer cottages, and the maintenance that's required for a private road, there's really no meat left on the bone in this bill. I told the prime sponsor that, you know, if he wanted it to be interim studied, or whatever the correct term in this part of the year is, that I would do that, but I wasn't going to participate much in that studying. Comments from the rest of you?
Chairman, I would be inclined to agree. I think this bill may create some unintentional tangles that we don't necessarily need to add to our RSAs.
Yeah, I agree. I'm prepared to ITL or support interim study.
Okay. Make your pick.
Well,
I think you said ITL first.
all right, sir, I move ITL.
Second.
Okay, further comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and I will take that one out also, so that Senator Murphy doesn't have to talk about it.
Senator Abrams, my friend. I've heard some hurt feelings.
Relative to moving the primary date. Okay. This is Senator Lang's bill. I know that Senator Abbas has supported this bill in the past. I did point out that the inspectors of election, right now in RSA 658-2, They are to be appointed between May the 15th and July the 15th, and that's in order for them to receive training before the primary election. So I don't know that that needs to be in there. Certainly, when is the effective date of this? Effective date is January of 25. So they wouldn't be elected for a year after that in 26. So if you want to move this bill along, we can do that without the amendment, because there would be time to change the date for the inspectors of election being appointed prior to 26, which is when the next election, state election cycle would be after the effective date of this. Comments from anyone else? Senator Murphy.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to have to run in a moment. I just got notified that my hearing is up.
So you move on to pass?
No, no, I do not.
Okay.
If you're looking for a motion from me, it would be ITL. I still have the same concerns about moving a primary that early.
Do I have a motion from anyone?
I'll make a motion about to pass.
Okay. Senator Abbott makes a motion about it pass. Do I have a second? I'll second it for discussion purposes. And I think I know what the vote's going to come out. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And I'll go aye. All
I'll go
those opposed say, you're an aye also?
Yeah, I was on the fence, but I do support having a longer
And
time
all
to
those
know our
opposed say nay.
candidates.
Nay.
And the ayes have it. And Senator Abbott, you get to take this one out.
I move that we leave executive session.
We have a motion to come out of executive session. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Our business today being complete, we are adjourned.